Hey class, today we're going to talk about motivation and emotion. I hope you're motivated to what? No, I'm not gonna. No, that's a that's real corny, and I'm sorry that I even tried to do that. So when we're looking at motivation, we're looking at the reasons why we do specific things, the things that influence why we do specific things. So for example, you're listening to this lecture right now, right? Or you've just pressed play and it's playing in the background while you're doing something else. But there's something that motivated you to click on the link and watch this or listen to it or play it in the background, right? So when we're looking at human behavior, one of the big things that we're wondering is why people do things. So that's why we look at motivation. So one big thing is satisfaction of needs. There are specific things that we need to do in order to survive. So I'm recording this on May 3rd, and I'm realizing as I'm recording this that I have not paid my rent. Oopsie. Uh, oh boy, better fix that because it's due on the 1st and I need to pay it. Otherwise, I won't have a home anymore and I'll be recording future lectures from an alley. So there is some social factor that needs to be taken care of that I'm taking care of. Another need could just be the fact that a couple hours ago I ate food. Now I wasn't necessarily hungry, but I was like, it's 6 o'clock. My body needs food. I should probably eat something. These are needs. So this guy named Abraham Maslow had this idea about how we prioritize needs. So if you remember the food pyramid, you have like grains on the bottom and then like fruits and vegetables and things like that, right? All the things that are the most important at the bottom, and then at the top are the things that are least important. That's how this hierarchy works. So at the bottom, right here, we have the foundation of the pyramid, physiological needs. If you haven't taken care of your physiological needs, right? Air, water, food, if you're underwater suffocating, you're probably not thinking about how many Instagram followers you have. Your immediate need is to take care of the fact that you need air, right? So these physiological needs are the most important. Now, once we've taken care of those, we can focus on safety, right? If you're being hunted by a lion, or if you are feeling sick, any of these types of things that are endangering your immediate safety, it's much more difficult to focus on higher level needs. But once that's taken care of, we can focus on love and belonging, right? Our friends, our intimate partners, those types of things, social groups that we're involved in. So when safety is taken care of, our personal safety, then we're more concerned with our social network. Then once that's taken care of, we focus on esteem. And esteem can be anything, whether it's being considered the funniest person in the room, or having lots of Instagram followers, or whatever you feel makes you good, getting good grades, right? Once we've taken care of those bottom three, then we focus on the things that make us feel good about ourselves. Then finally, there's the idea of self-actualization, which is the idea of becoming the best version of yourself. So we focus on these bottom ones first, and then we move our way up the pyramid. Now, you might be aware of the fact that sometimes we don't always go in this order. So, for example, if you've ever been in class and been hungry, right, you want to do well in the class, but you have this physiological need that you're ignoring in order to focus on the class material. We have the ability to delay our gratification and put some needs in front of the others. That's why our prefrontal cortex is so important, because it allows us to look at multiple things that we want to do and plan accordingly to get the best outcome. Then we have drive reduction. Drive reduction is an internal psychological state that is influencing our desire to do a specific thing. So let's say that you're feeling really hungry right now, or maybe you really need to use the restroom, right? That feeling of, if I don't do this right now, I'm going to die. That is a drive. That's different than just eating because you know that you need to eat, or going to the restroom before you go on a long trip because you know that it's going to be a thing that you're going to need to do anyway. A drive reduction is motivated by the desire to reduce a specific feeling that you have. This is related to the idea of homeostasis. So our brains are trying to keep our body balanced. If we feel too hot, we try to cool ourselves down. If we feel too cold, we try to warm ourselves up. Freud had this idea of two drives, the eros drive and the thanatos drive. The eros drive is related to pleasure and life, so it's the part of us that makes us want to create. The thanatos drive is related to aggression and death, right? So we're balancing these two very opposite drives in that sometimes we want to be creative and other times we want to be destructive. But these are still drives, right? So if you meet somebody and you think that they're very attractive and you want to hold their hand and kiss them, right? That is eros. If you meet somebody who cuts you off on the road and gives you the finger and you want to honk back at them, that's thanatos, right? So both of these are drives that we're experiencing that we're trying to reduce. Sometimes we are motivated to act on a specific behavior based off of how much it arouses us. Now, don't be weird about this. Arousal doesn't mean sexual arousal necessarily. It means more the arousal of our brain. So certain things might arouse us more than other things. And all of us have a specific level of arousal that we prefer. So, what might be boring to one person might be exciting to another person. So, some people really enjoy reading a book, right? There's nothing more exciting than going home, being by yourself, and opening a good book. Other people enjoy skydiving or going to a club, right? So we have this level, which is the optimal level of arousal. Anything more than that is stressful. Anything less than that is boring, right? So we're motivated to do things that match what we consider that optimal level of arousal. So some of us might prefer to go to the club on a weekend instead of staying home and playing video games because going out and being around lots of people, that hits our optimal level of arousal. Other people hear that and they think, oh, that's too much, right? That's panic inducing because it's much higher than that optimum level. So when we're thinking about motivation, we can think, what is going to hit that optimum level of arousal? I have to explain this picture because I was Google image searching pleasure, and all of the photos that I found are not suitable for a class lecture. So I decided to Google principal. And so I found this image. So this is a different type of principal. This is PAL, not PLE, but it's fine. It will do the job. The pleasure principle is the idea that we pursue things that bring us joy and we avoid things that bring us pain. So let's say I had a choice between two options, right? I have a choice between going to a ramen shop or going to a pho place. Now, I love ramen, but I hate pho, right? So I'm just so you know, I love both equally. They're both beautiful types of soup. But for this example, I hate pho. Now I'm craving it. Uh, if you're wondering what motivates me to go to a ramen shop versus a pho place, it's because I like ramen. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but the idea is we are motivated to do things that we enjoy and we avoid things that we don't enjoy. And then finally, we have incentives. Incentives are external things that motivate us to do a specific behavior. So, for example, I'm a teacher. Now, you might think that the reason why I teach is because I love teaching. I love helping students understand material and I like working with them and grading papers. No, you're wrong. I do it for the paycheck, all that sweet teaching money, baby. So an incentive is the idea that we do things for some other goal, right? Maybe we, have a partner that we're dating and we do something nice for them, not because we enjoy that specific thing that we're doing, but we might just do it because we want to make our partner happy, right? That is an incentive. This ties in with the ideas of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Sometimes we do things because we enjoy the specific thing that we're doing. Sometimes we do specific things because it's going to get us closer to another goal. So, for example, you're taking an intro to psychology class. Now, you might be taking this class because you love psychology and you're like, I want to be a psychologist. I don't need anything other than just being able to learn more about psychology, right? That would be intrinsic motivation. For some of you, there might be an incentive, right? You need to take a certain number of classes in order to graduate and transfer, and this is just one step on the way towards graduation. So that would be extrinsic motivation. And in case you're wondering, something can be motivated through intrinsic and extrinsic means. So maybe you want to graduate, but you also enjoy psychology. Hopefully you enjoy psychology. If not, that's fine. Just, hit me up in that comment section and just tell me that you hate psychology and I will cry and it will be fine. So you can talk about motivation and emotion without talking about sex. So one of the pioneering research teams was the team of Masters and Johnson. If you have seen I believe it's on Showtime show, Masters of Sex. Now I need to Google it. You can hear me Googling right now. Masters of Sex, American drama series. What was it on? It does not tell me. Oh, Showtime. Yep, I was right. But now you know that you can trust me because I always check my answers to make sure that they're correct. The Masters and Johnson did a lot of pioneering work in that they actually looked at how sexual behavior occurred by monitoring it. There was a lot of theorizing, but there were two issues. One, for a very long time, American scientists were very shy about like looking into sex scientifically because of the conservative nature of the country, and also there just in general wasn't a lot of scientific interest in the female side of sexuality. And also for that's still true today, where gynecological studies are very limited. We still don't understand a lot about the physiology of the female reproductive system, which is very sad. So What Masters and Johnson did was they just watched a whole bunch of people having sex while being connected to different types of physiological measures that allowed them to understand what is going on physiologically in the brain and body. And this was pioneering research because for the longest time we just depended on theories, right? Or not even true theories, but just guesses and assumptions. So they were able to debunk a lot of myths as a result of this. And a lot of the things that we think about how sex works, we one if uh, the thing that you think isn't wrong, it's probably because of Masters and Johnson. But there are lots of myths that still exist to this day. One myth is that women desire sex less than men. That men are these very just like sex focused animals, and women just like aren't interested in it at all. But Masters and Johnson realized that men and women desire sex about equally, right? You might have heard the theory that like men think about sex every minute or whatever, or every 7 seconds or whatever, and women think about sex like once a day. That is not true. I have some friends who are women, and they are very just very graphic in their descriptions of some things that they desire. So both men and women have an equal propensity to be super sexual or even very asexual, right? The only real difference between men and women is that women in general have the tendency to be multi-orgasmic. So you can see here differences in sexual arousal. So a typical man starts to get more aroused. So now this is sexual arousal. And then at a certain point, they plateau right here. That is referred to as orgasm. And men tend to have what is called a refractory period, where they cannot get aroused for a specific amount of time. And that is has some evolutionary aspects to it, right? If you look at the purpose of sex from a biological standpoint, not a social standpoint, just purely biologically, it is to spread your genes as widely as possible, right? So the body needs time to prepare more sperm. That is the purpose of the refractory period. So it takes a moment before a man can orgasm again. Women can be multi-orgasmic, referring to the fact that they can be continually receptive. From a biological standpoint, that's the clearest difference between sexual um, arousal in men and women. Men tend to have this down period, but women can continue to orgasm time after time. So the great thing about studying sex is it changes our understanding of what sex is, right? The most important thing in science is that we don't just take things at face value, and we understand that just because we've assumed something to be true for a long period of time doesn't necessarily mean that it is true. So when we talk about sex and gender in a future chapter, keep those things in mind. Emotions, right? Ugh, who needs them? When we're talking about emotions, they are composed of both the actual thing that we're feeling, the our behavioral expression, right, what shows up on our face, sometimes referred to as affect, and then the actual psychological arousal. So there's this mix between what you can see on somebody's face and then what you're also feeling, both psychologically and physiologically, right? When we talk about emotions, we should also just mention emotional intelligence. So, Emotional intelligence differs from the more kind of academic intelligence, which is like, can you solve a Rubik's Cube? Do you know a lot of words? Can you do math well, right? Emotional intelligence is our ability to kind of read other people and understand their needs. You might know people with what might be considered low emotional intelligence, right? The uh, stereotypical example of this is like a heteronormative relationship. The woman comes in and she's like, "Does this dress make me look fat, honey?" And then a man with low emotional intelligence would say, "Yes, it does. Pick a different dress." The man with high emotional intelligence might say, in this very stereotypical situation, "My dear, every dress to you is like a ring on a diamond. The diamond does not need the ring, but the ring only serves to accent the beauty of the diamond. You need no polish. You need no shine. You reflect the light, but you also are the light," right? High emotional intelligence. So be aware of that uh, thing. That's a thing that you should know. That's why I put it on the slide, because it's a thing you should know. That was the most elegant thing that I've ever said, that this thing is a thing that you should know. So know that thing. The thing is there, and now you know that it's a thing to know. So there are three theories of emotion: James Lang, Cannon-Bard, Schachter-Singer two-factor theory. So the James Lang theory is the idea that we have this physiological response in our body, and then we have an emotion, right? So there's this kind of like cause and effect relationship. So there's a scary bear. This is the example from the textbook. There's a scary bear, right? And the physiological response that I have when I have this sympathetic nervous response causes an emotion. Now, the Cannon-Bard theory is slightly different. It's the idea that both my emotional response and my physiological response are happening at the same time because of different functions of the brain. So I have one part of my brain that's saying, well, I'm afraid because there's a bear here, and another part of my brain that's going, let me make the feelings of fear. So let me make my heart beat faster, maybe make my, palms sweaty, maybe put some vomit on my sweater already. It's mom's spaghetti. Maybe I'm nervous, but on the surface I look calm and ready to drop bombs, but I keep on forgetting what I wrote down. The whole crowd. Uh, oh, what, where, where am I? Sorry about that. So, the James Lang theory is that physiological responses happen and then emotional responses happen. The Cannon-Bard theory is that they happen at the same time. The Schachter-Singer two-factor theory is really interesting. It's the idea that we have a physiological response in the brain and the body, but then our mind labels that physiological response as an emotion. So it's not just the physiological response happens and then that causes the emotion. Our brain actually determines what the emotion is based on the context. So if you go back to having weak knees and palms that are sweaty, right? That could happen when you're excited about something. So let's say you know that your favorite video game or movie or something is being released and you're in line to pick it up or watch it, right? You might feel these, like your heart's beating real fast, and you might feel very sweaty, and you might feel like shaky and weird, right? You would label that as excitement. Now, if you were nervous about something, right? You didn't feel great about a test that you took, and the teacher's handing back tests, and they're calling people one at a time, and you're like, oh, this is going to be the worst. You might feel those same physiological responses, but you're not going to say, I'm excited to find out how I did. You're going to feel anxious. So our brains label how we actually are feeling based off of our physiological responses and the context, right? Which is interesting because that means that if we're feeling anxious, which is usually seen as negative, we can turn it into a positive, right? So instead of feeling nervous and worried about how well you did, you can go, I'm excited to see how well I did. And that can turn a negative emotion into a positive one. Speaking of dealing with emotions, sometimes emotions are just too much. Am I right? So, the way that we can deal with them is through regulating those emotions. Now, we all have our preferred ways of regulating emotions. Uh, One that you might guess for me is humor. So, the sometimes we're feeling something very stressful, so we might make a joke about it. We might put ourselves down, or we might make a joke about the situation. In some medical situations, you might see what's called gallows humor. So people who are suicidal or terminally ill might make jokes about their situation, which, if you're not used to it, can be very jarring. But they might make jokes about, like, oh, well, I'm going to die anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? And that's their way of coping with the severity of their situation. So, humor can be a very powerful way of coping with very intense emotions. We also have thought suppression and rumination. Sometimes things are so intense that we just try not to think about them, right? So, if I recently got broken up with, I could make a joke about how I'm unlovable and I'll never find anyone again, humor, right? Or I could just say, I'm not going to think about it, which would be thought suppression. Or I can say, or I can just think about it all the time, right? What did I do? There was this one conversation that we had 2 months ago. Maybe they were still upset about that. Like maybe they didn't like my friend, right? That thing where we constantly think about every aspect about something, that is rumination. Now we can also distract ourselves, right? This is the idea of the rebound. If you don't want to think about one person, you find another person to think about. Or if a friend recently passed, maybe you play more video games or you take more hours at work, right? You can find something to distract you so that you don't have to think about those emotions. So we talked about emotions, we talked about motivation. So I hope that you're feeling motivated to do well in the rest of the class. Oh, oh, we have fun. Have a great rest of your day.